Welcome to the Retail Tech Podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Drew Cashmore from Vantage, a company in the retail media networks space. Drew is the head of strategy for Vantage, and happy to have you on the show, Drew.
Excited to spend time with you.
Let's start with a background on yourself, and then we'll talk about Vantage and the business.
That's perfect. If I think about the retail media space, I started in this space about 15 years ago. I was hired by Walmart in the Canadian market to build a small advertising business to offset the cost of e-commerce. So in the Canadian market, Walmart wasn't truly investing in last mile delivery and the technology that would support the operations of e-commerce. And so we brought a small team in to create advertising solutions on the site and then sell the broader ecosystem around Walmart. Scaled that pretty significantly over a few years. And then in 2017, Walmart had just acquired Jet.com, and Mark Laurie was really trying to figure out how do we accelerate and create a real advertising solution for Walmart. We had a small outsourced um, retail media business at the time. And the idea was if you could bring this in-house and create the right services behind it and right technologies and right infrastructure that you could create a pretty substantial competitive offering to Amazon. And so I was part of that leadership team that was brought down to San Francisco and created what is now a $4.5 billion advertising business. I've since played a bunch of roles in different places. I was the CMO of a company called Firework, which is live shopping in the US market, as well as creating a consultancy in retail media. So today I run strategy for Vantage, as well as work in the open market with retailers, helping them accelerate their retail media businesses.
So, what is a retail media network?
It's funny. It's such a simple question, but I don't know even where to start. The way I think about this as a baseline is advertising in a retail environment. And it's morphed over time. It retail media started in the space of just digital and on-site advertising, but it's moved into encompassing basically advertising in and around a retail environment, leveraging data that's associated with customers and their purchase behaviors. This is a differentiated media offering. If you go back to what media was before retail media, you were extrapolating the conversions or purchases that were associated with an ad. You were using media mix models to determine the value of the ad you put in market. And so in a lot of ways we were kind of guessing. What retail media does somewhat unique is it ties the actual purchase or the intent to purchase back to the view of an ad. And you can start to get really smart about how you deterministically reach consumers and how you use advertising dollars more effectively to push people all the way down the funnel to a purchase and then tie that back to the view of those ads. And so I think about this space as just a much smarter advertising or media model than what we've historically had.
It's still considered paid media, correct?
Correct. Yes.
So you are competing with the Google and other paid media when you're doing this. And what you're telling me is that this is a more effective and more efficient paid media channel than Google, for example. Is that correct?
I would argue it might be more effective. There's certainly a higher cost to reaching consumers in a retail environment. And that's a little bit predetermined by the retailers. But the idea is if you have access to real consumer data or customer data and you can tie those ads back to a real transaction, that there's certainly more value in that overall. But it is higher cost.
Can
I
you drill down on that? What do you mean is higher
Yeah.
cost, like the CPA, cost per acquisition or cost per CPA? What is the higher cost?
If you were to do an apples to apples comparison on a CPM basis or a CPC basis, you might run into the reality that retail media is more expensive. From a return perspective, it's really, really hard to gauge because the way in which traditional media models look at the performance of advertising is on a reach and frequency basis. And so the more efficient or the cheaper the CPM is, and I'm dumbing this down a lot, but the more efficient the CPM is, the higher the reach, potentially the higher the frequency. And and as a result, those models show a much strong or a very strong return. If you were to do an apples to apples comparison then with retail media, which has a higher cost CPM, even if you're seeing true transactions, even if the technology is able to associate a view of an ad with the purchase of a product, an apples to apples comparison in an MMM always looks worse for retail media because the cost of the CPM is higher. And so it's very hard to gauge a Google or a Meta buy against a retail media buy in a one-to-one way.
So if that's the case, how do advertisers justify?
There's two ways that we're going to need to think about this in the future. One is there is a subset of investments that are going to continue to flow into retail media because it's closest to purchase. And so irrespective of what an apples to apples comparison on the value of that ad, you should be advertising in a retail environment because either your competitors are, um, or you're investing a lot of money in the open media ecosystem. And when a person gets to the point of purchase, when they're reaching out on the shelf to buy that product, if you're not there, you're missing an opportunity to close that loop. And so it's to say that independently, retail media is going to continue to scale. But the apples to apples comparison is something that I think we're still figuring out and working through. And my sense is that we're probably going to have to overweight the value of a retail media ad because it's closer to purchase in a traditional MMM model to make things more comparable. I'm going to get in trouble for saying that.
Who are some good examples of a successful retail media deployment or network from your point of view? Some of the top examples.
So I have bias towards Walmart and what we built there, and I can touch on that. I really like where retailers like the Home Depot are going. And there's what I see in that group of Orange Apron Media is a understanding of some of the core fundamentals that need to happen in this space in order to accelerate. So recognition that a deeper relationship with your merchandising teams is incredibly important. Recognition that bringing together a bunch of disparate technologies under a single unified buying platform is incredibly important for acceleration. Recognizing that B2B marketing at scale is what is going to set you up against a Google or a Meta or other media companies. And so I'm really excited and bullish on companies like the Home Depot. What Walmart did 6, 7 years ago in terms of the transformation within the organization set them up for a lot of success today. And so you've seen this incredible growth and capturing of net new dollars into their ecosystem because they invested in the business, because they managed change within the organization, and because they were willing to scream from the rooftops about how valuable it was.
Can you explain a little bit more about the Orange Apron Media?
Sure. Orange Apron Media is Home Depot's retail media business. So they run advertising on behalf of suppliers, and they also have, powered by Vantage, a self-serve tool that advertisers can buy through across multiple media channels.
Let's talk about what is Vantage and what is the core value that or product.
I'm really excited about Vantage as a proposition, irrespective of me being here. One of the core challenges in the retail media space is that there are point solutions that represent a subset of the overall value chain of retail media. So you have CDPs that power customer data. You have CRMs that power your clients' advertising information. You have a tool for on-site search, which is often different than the tool for on-site display, which is different than the tool that you reach consumers off-site. And None of those systems talk to each other. And so when you're building a campaign or when you're running the business, you're typically doing so with email and spreadsheets and coordinating against all of those disparate systems. What Vantage does is create a unified layer between disparate tools in the retail media stack, such that the user, be it an advertiser or the retailer, goes into a single user interface and does everything from planning a campaign and establishing an order to optimizing campaign measurement, billing, reconciliation, creative design. Everything happens in this one tool that then pushes different subsets of that into the right systems of record. I think about this as the orchestration or operating system for retail media, or kind of the equivalent of a ServiceNow model for retail media.
If we take that and try to understand how it was applied, for example, at Orange Apron, what was the process of getting started with Vantage for them?
We started with Home Depot on offsite advertising. So we powered their social um, retail media components and expanded into on-site in the last, I'd say, in the last year. There's multiple ways that we've onboarded with different retailers. Some of them are starting with a small proof of concept. Some of them are doing a complete rebuild and managing all those integrations at once. I would say that the because this is a reasonably new concept, this connection of disparate tools in the retail media space, people are often tepid to completely rebuild their entire architecture, or at least reskin it in order to get to that end goal of connecting all the pieces. And so we typically do it in pieces. But I think that the best in class solution, and some retailers we're talking to now are in that stage, is connect all the pieces now. So you create differentiation, you create ownership of the business model, and you um, frankly reduce the level of effort in running a retail media business significantly. We have a bunch of value models where we look at how much efficiency you can find in the overall tool set. And if I use an example of a retailer with 7 different tactics in their retail media business, we take the time to plan an average campaign from about an hour and 45 minutes to 15 minutes. And so when you can find that much efficiency in the model, it means you can scale with a lot less resources.
Do you also handle in-store?
We do. There's multiple ways you can build this. And one of the real challenges within store is an individual store might actually have 10 different technologies that are powering, say, screens in the store. And so it's not easy to manage that ecosystem today. There are really neat companies that are trying to connect all of those dots, and we interface with those as opposed to going direct into these disparate tools. But absolutely, this is a part of the overall proposition today.
What is the length of an engagement to get started? Is it like really tech heavy, a lot of developer work, or pretty simple?
One of the really interesting things that we've run up against is that individual retailers, even if they're using common tools, so there's really only 5 or 6 core technologies that power product listing ads on retail websites for the most part. Even though they're using common tools, Vantage still has to do a little bit of a custom lift in order to interface with the specific implementations at a retail level. And so we take typically about 3 months of onboarding in order to ramp up, because each retailer has a different type of implementation of the same thing. Now, the difference in what we're doing as opposed to more of an off-the-shelf solution is saying, look, instead of forcing you to do the development work on your end, we'll do the development work and better or map to what you're building. But that obviously takes a little bit of time. Our CEO uses this example when we took on the on-site platform or operations for Home Depot. They asked us how long it would take, and we said 3 months. And they said, no, it's going to take you at least a year. And we hit it in 4 months. And so it
Okay.
certainly it works if we do it right.
What do you consider a successful implementation for Vantage? How do you measure that?
All tools and tactics in a retail media business in one place. That's the simplest way to do it. In addition to this disparate tool set that exists in the space, we're forcing advertisers to buy through all of these different places. And so an individual retailer might say, hey, advertiser, if you want to buy media from us, I expect you to work in these 5 different tools. A best in class solution is that they only have to work in one. And so if we can piece that together up front, then it makes it much more beneficial for the advertiser and much more appealing for them to buy with that individual retailer.
But as far as like a metric, like time saved for marketing teams or advertising teams, or the number of ads created or revenues, are there specific numbers that you look at to say, okay, yeah, this is actually working out really good?
There's actually 3 components to it. Reduction in time spent overall, reduction in the amount of steps it takes to build an omni-channel campaign, and then flow that through to billing, and increased flow through of advertising spend. And we, as a business model, make money when the retailer grows. And so it's beneficial for us and or mutually beneficial that we work towards the growth of the retail media business overall. But one of the things that I'm really, really excited about in this proposition is that if you can create extreme efficiencies, you can reduce the amount of people that are needed to grow the business, and you can accelerate revenues faster. And if you do that, the net benefit is pretty significant cumulative over 4 or 5 years. And so we're trying to get people to pull their revenues forward, by finding efficiencies in the model and therefore helping them generate a lot more money upfront.
What criteria do you use upfront when you talk to a potential customer or a retailer to determine if they should really get into retail media or not?
This is a really nuanced one. What happens in the market today, especially in an earlier stage RMN, is that they've outsourced most of the work. And so they aren't actually running their business. They're not in control of their business. Someone else is doing the work for them, setting the strategy, managing the sales and operations, and so on. The retailers that are willing or have a desire to bring their business in-house then don't actually have the expertise to do so. And so what we're trying to help people through now, and really what my job is here at Vantage, is kind of guiding people through that journey into a more scaled and owned operation, and kind of giving them the keys to their car. And that is a big struggle overall. Helping people move into a much more owned and complex environment is something that not everybody is comfortable with. And so we look for, first of all, people that are willing and have the true curiosity and desire to run their business, to people that are willing to invest in this business. In the case that it is fully outsourced, a lot of the time there's tech companies that are coming in and kind of lowballing the cost of their operations. And what happens in that model is that they don't invest in the technology, they don't invest in the resources, and the retailer ultimately doesn't grow. And so we're really working towards a model whereby they have a desire to truly own their business, and two is they have a willingness and a capability to invest in their growth. It's not crazy expensive, but it certainly is not free. And I think that's one of the struggles and challenges we have in the marketplace today is that retailers are especially in an early stage, are expecting this to be easy, and it is not.
Do you have like audience number minimum requirements?
To answer those 2 components, someone that is willing to build and invest in their business, we need a retailer that's usually in the range of 20 billion plus. And that scales all the way up to some of the largest retailers in the world are still trying to figure out this problem. But typically anyone under, say, 20 billion in gross revenue they're not at the place where they have the capacity or desire to truly run or build a retail media business. And so that's kind of our lower limit. And to your question, this isn't just a digital proposition. And so there are a lot of retailers that we're in conversations with now that actually don't have a digital presence. And they're trying to figure out still how you connect your physical environment, retail media components into a single tool set. So it's really across the board.
Let's talk about generative AI. How is it changing your business or your customers' businesses?
I'm not confident we're there yet. Retailers of all scale right now are seemingly comfortable with emails and spreadsheets as their workflow for things like retail media. And if that's our baseline today, introducing and relinquishing control to AI is a pretty big step overall. It's not to say that we're not going to get there. It's not to say that we're not already finding pretty amazing efficiencies in the use of AI in retail, but it's ingrained in the operational model versus overt to the users. And what I mean by that is Vantage, as an example, uses AI to optimize campaign planning. We use AI in some sense to create dynamic ads. But we are not necessarily fronting an LLM access or using natural language to build campaigns at this point because it does not seem like the user is ready. One of the things I'm fascinated or intrigued about in the retail media space dovetails off of a previous podcast you had on discovery when we moved to an agentic AI world. And I think that is a similar challenge we're going to run into in the retail media space. That is, we put ads on websites and we put ads in store. And if you're not, if a human isn't actually doing the work, what happens to the advertising space? I think if you play this out, some of the retailers that have scaled their retail media business, they're seeing upwards of 20-30% of their operating income coming from advertising alone. And when you move, or if you move into an agentic world, it fundamentally changes the construct of advertising and therefore fundamentally changes their business model. And so I don't know what that looks like, but I think it's something to watch for.
Also applies to other forms of attribution and, like, let's say affiliate networks. There is no
Yep.
solution right now on how an affiliate would work in an agentic commerce application. The new standard model context protocol MCP looks like it's actually has a chance of becoming an industry-wide standard. Maybe there are some technologies in there that can actually help tracking or, figuring out where an ad came from or how an ad would be, but it is like one of those big unknown areas.
I'm excited about it though.
Well, thank you so much, Drew. This has been really exciting.
I'm glad we got to spend some time together. This was awesome.